Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Beginner to Master Speedrun episode number 16. If you caught the last one, I did break 1000 elo. Now, there's been a lot of comments asking for longer episodes, so I'll try and deliver today with a long one. But before we get to the chess, I do want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is BetterHelp. Chess can be an emotional roller coaster. One moment, you're a tactical genius. The next, you're blundering your queen and questioning all your decisions. It's actually a fitting metaphor for life. And if you're ever feeling pinned down in life and you need someone to talk to, then therapy can really help. And this is where BetterHelp comes in. Their mission is to make therapy accessible and affordable, regardless of where you live or what issues you may be facing. BetterHelp is an online platform that makes finding a therapist as easy as solving this checkmate in one puzzle. Just be careful not to stalemate. By filling out a few questions, BetterHelp will match you with a professional, licensed therapist in as little as 48 hours. If you want to give it a try, click the link in the video description, betterhelp.com/Eric Rosen, to get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp and join the over 4 million people who have used BetterHelp to live a happier and healthier life. Now, thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to the chess. Okay, let's hop into it. Joining the 10-minute pool, playing Burham B. And we have a, what do we call this, center game? This could be the beginning of a Danish if we see c3. But queen takes d4 is a center game opening. And generally against this, it makes sense just to develop and attack the queen. And the downside for this for white is a queen is spending few moves in the opening rather than white developing the minor pieces. Queen e3 is, I think, the best move. And here I can continue developing. There is a line where white can play e5 and then knight g4, which we're entering. I have studied this before, but from an understanding point of view, I do have to move the knight. I can't play queen e7 because it would not actually be a pin. And when I move the knight, I hit the queen and I hit the pawn on e5. And I'll start with this move. But there is a tricky line that if white plays queen e2 and I take the pawn, then white could play f4. So in the event of queen e2 or queen e4, pretty sure there is something kind of important that black has to do. But I'll wait for my opponent to move before I go further in explanation. Opponent disconnected, maybe having some Wi-Fi issues. There's other options for the queen too, but I think these are the two of the trickier moves. With queen f4, now I don't mind taking the pawn. I was going to say, and I can show it after the game, that if the queen stayed on the e-file, I would have probably played d6. But for now, yeah, let's just regain the pawn. And okay, white's moving the queen for what? This is a 4th time in the first 7 moves. White is pinning the knight, so the threat is to play f4 to win the knight. But generally, when the queen is so exposed in the center, you just want to look for ways to attack it. And d5 is a very simple move. Gonna force the queen to move again. Knight on e5 is defended. We see queen e2, so white is still threatening to play f4. Despite white breaking some opening principles, I still have to be careful here. And I mean, I think the simplest choices are bishop e7 or bishop e6. But is there anything else to consider? I'd like to be like a bit more active. Like I'm looking for ways to make it so if white plays f4, then I can somehow punish white, but I'm not seeing anything super obvious. And I probably don't want to overthink things. Like bishop e7, a very stable move. Preparing to castle. The goal in this position is to get a rook to e8 as quickly as possible. e-file is the only open file. White has a queen and king aligned on that file. So white finally developed something that's not the queen. Knight c3, logical move. I could consider playing d4. I think in this case, why not? Like, attack the knight, grab some space. If knight e4, then I can decide probably between castling. There's definitely a lot of attacking type moves. Okay, even here with knight b5, I could play a6 if I want. Knight is then probably going to be forced to a3. Yeah, let's do it. a6. So far, this game has been a matter of like basically attacking my opponent's pieces, gaining a lot of time. And yeah, now I can probably just castle. I mean, pretty soon I want to look for opportunities to be forcing like bishop b4 or bishop takes a3. With then the idea of playing rook e8 and exploiting the e-file. So white moves a knight another time. I mean, I could trade if I want, make the queen move again, and then develop with tempo to attack the queen again. So knight takes e4 is an option. Another option is to start with bishop b4 check. Because c3, I'm happy to take it. And if bishop d2, then maybe just make this a bit cleaner. Bishop b4, bishop d2, and then rook e8. And then I'm setting up a bunch of nasty threats with the e-file. Let's go for that. Bishop b4. Yeah, sometimes in chess it can be hard to punish the opponent immediately for breaking principles. Like, still requires patience. Still have to follow principles yourself. But here I'm just trying to optimize my pieces. I'm realizing that, like, bishop d2, rook e8, white could queenside castle. Maybe I'm not getting anything there. All right, I do have knight takes c4 as well. I kind of have to choose which path I want to follow. Like, there's a lot of good-looking options here. Yeah, rook e8, queenside castle, I don't see anything immediate. Like, I have discovery potential. I do have bishop g4 there, actually. Bishop g4. Okay, I'm going to play rook e8. Again, in this time control, it's important to not overthink things too much. Like, have to save my time to hopefully convert my advantage too. So white does castle. Now I'm going to play bishop g4. So, I mean, basically the principle has been just accelerate development. I have all my minor pieces developed. The rook aligned with the queen. And in these cases, usually there's bound to be tactics. The tactic I'm looking at is if f3, then I could take on f3. We see queen e4, so I still have the discovery against the queen. And if I move the knight, I leave my bishop undefended. Also, the rook is hanging. It's getting a little bit weird here. Debating between taking the rook first or taking the knight first. Both options look pretty good. I'm going to take the knight first, because I'm hitting the queen and hitting the bishop. White could take on g4, I'll take on d2, and life will be very good. Take on d2 with the knight or bishop? Maybe the knight. I'll take with the knight, so the knight's not a target on c4. Kind of a weird game thus far, but I've managed to win a piece. And if takes, then I guess black will be up a rook and pawn for bishop. We see knight f3. So I'm debating whether to take the bishop or the knight. I think I'll take the knight. The bishop's still undeveloped. It's possible white... Okay, I was going to say white could take back with the g-pawn and use the g-file maybe, but... yeah, we see takes with queens, so I think I'll play queen g5. Forcing the king to b1. It's very tempting to like look for back rank mates. The queen d2 then takes, and I'm not mating because the rook can move back. So I don't want to be overly fancy. I think I'll just get my final piece into play. If white develops, then I can potentially play knight e5 and then force some exchanges. Yeah, let's play knight e5. We'll up the tempo a little bit. With this move, I do leave b7 undefended, but I actually don't mind... Was that a mouse slip? Maybe white intended this move, but maybe white also missed the fact the pawn could take. I'm not sure. There's no option to give a take back, so opponent resigns. Okay, a slightly abrupt finish. I was going to say that if queen takes b7, I would have been happy to have the b file open, and then the plan would have been to probably first take the bishop, let's say rook takes, and even a move like rook b8, like give away one of these pawns and go for the b file pressure. And if we got to this position, white would maybe have to play this, and then the bishop and pawn have a very nice combo. Maybe I could snag on g2 or find a way to get my queen to a3 and b2. But anyway, I think that was a nice example of how to punish the opponent for just moving the queen too many times and then moving the knight a few too many times in the opening. Before we move on to the next game, I do want to show what I think is an important opening idea, like for anyone that might play this as black. And if white plays queen e2, then it would be a blunder here to take on e5 because of f4. And then black is losing the knight. It's just a simple pin along the e-file. So rather than taking the pawn, it's best for black to actually gambit and play the move d6, which defends a knight. And if white takes, yeah, it looks scary because white just won another pawn and is checking the king. And yeah, black can block. And let's say takes, then black can take back. And if we count material, black's down a pawn, but there's just huge development, huge lead in development for black. Ideas of knight d4 and queenside castling and just getting all the pieces into play. And this is already completely winning according to Stockfish. So it's a useful thing to know that and sometimes in opening, you want to focus more on piece activity over material. And this is a nice example of that. So hopefully some lessons to take away. Let's move on to the next game. Playing Abu Dhabi. And I'll play e4. So rating has gone up to 1025. I'll play the Italian. At some point in the series, I'll probably mix up the openings. Usually I play d3. I think in this game, I'll play c3. This is an opening I learned around the 1000 elo. And the idea is to very simply expand with pawn d4, get tempo on the bishop, and pawn d4 is supported by the pawn, the knight, and the queen. So a move like knight f6 or d6, white can still play d4, and the pawn is supported enough times. Now, this opening, I believe, is called the, actually chess.com says it's called the Gioco Piano Center Attack. I think there's a variation called the Molar Attack, which maybe we'll go into. Black is so far playing all the most natural moves. Bishop b4 check. And in this position, there's two moves. There's bishop d2 and knight c3. I think knight d2 is also a move, although it's pretty rare. The move I liked to play when I was younger was knight c3. This is one of the first openings my very first chess coach taught to me. Shout out to Tamara Golove. She was one of my first coaches and also the coach of Boris Gelfand and Yuri Shulman. And she taught me an opening growing up that if black takes a pawn, then I can castle kingside, essentially sacrificing another pawn. And there's cases where white will sacrifice a bit of material to get a lot of opening initiative. So we'll see if black wants to snag the pawn here. And we do see bishop takes c3. So we're actually going down a line that I learned when I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. So this is bringing back a lot of nostalgia. Now, of course, my rook's attacked. I think a lot of people who maybe are new to this position would play rook b1. But the move to play, as far as I remember, is queen to b3. I think bishop a3 is also possible, but queen b3 has the idea of hitting the bishop and the pawn on f7, and I'm leaving my rook just available for capture. We're already going to see another example of why you should prioritize piece activity and initiative over material, at least in some cases. And there's not too many options for black in this position. Like if black wants to save f7 with a move like castling or queen e7, then I'll take the bishop and be up material. We see d5. d5 maybe is one of the best moves. Although I think I'm happy to take the pawn and keep all of the attack. I can't recall if I studied this exact position in the past, but yeah, I mean, I still have the initiative against f7 and the bishop, and I lose a rook. As d5 was useful in ensuring that black has some development, but I'm going to take the pawn. King has to choose between a couple squares there. And now it's interesting because I learned this position when I was younger without the inclusion of d5. So I've basically learned the position with the pawn still on d7, after which the best move would be bishop g5 to provoke knight e7. I can show this after the game too, and then knight e5 would be very strong. But because black no longer has a d-pawn, if I play bishop g5, the queen can move up. I guess then I can recapture. But I'm thinking it might be more effective here to play bishop a3, which essentially exploits the fact black can't block with d6, the d-pawn is no longer there, and that will be forcing knight e7. So yeah, let's go for bishop a3. And I know in most games throughout the speedrun series, I have not relied on like deep opening preparation, but I guess this one is a bit of an exception. We did go into one of the more critical, but also like super interesting lines. And yeah, it looks good for white. Just with the two bishops and the queen, it seems like there should be like some mating ideas. Despite the fact I'm down, how much am I down? A rook and... Oh, pawns are equal, so I'm down the whole rook here. I could take back the bishop, but sometimes when you see like an obvious move, you want to still look for your other options. And I think maybe there's a couple alternatives I'm considering here. One is rook e1 to attack the pinned knight. The other is knight e5, which maybe looks a little bit slow because I'm losing d4, but there's a calculation, knight e5, let's say bishop takes d4 looks most natural, and then bishop g6 with the idea that I'm threatening queen f7 checkmate. And the bishop and the knight would be supporting f7, and even though black could take the bishop or the knight, then the other piece will still be helping out with a checkmate. So yeah, this is definitely requiring like higher level calculation than normally you would see at this rating level, but I think I'm going to go for 95. And this isn't really like there's definitely a difference between hope chess where you're maybe playing suboptimal moves hoping your opponent goes wrong, but this is more just trying to play what the position calls for. I think because I've sacrificed a lot of material, I want to be as aggressive as possible. I don't want to waste time recapturing the bishop, even though that was probably a fine option. Because if I get in this move, bishop g6, like there's so few resources for black to stop queen f7. And the knight's pinned, so the knight nor the queen can really help block on d5. Yeah, I'm gonna play bishop g6. And this is an idea I learned when I was like pretty young. This so-called clearance idea coming from this exact opening. Another big shout out to Tamara. I'll have to email her a link to this video once it's posted. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the tactics still work in this position. Like I really don't see a defense for black. Like there's so few moves that black can play that don't get mated immediately. Like this doesn't really work because then the rook gets involved. Queen e8 would delay the mate, but I'm happy to win the queen there. And queen d5, I just take it, the knight's pinned. And to be fair to my opponent, like they really did nothing obviously wrong this game. Like they took free material. They just walked into a super venomous opening line, which I think is going to lead to a quick win for white. Opponent is taking time here, but I think it's a little bit too late. I will say that like the mistake from black was taking the material on c3. And actually in this position, the best move is bishop takes c3, as far as I know. But taking twice on c3 is, as we've seen in this game, it runs into a lot of trouble. So opponent does have some time to ponder, maybe regret their earlier life decisions. And I think what I'll do is after the game, I will give an opening lesson on this opening of like how to respond as black. But yeah, okay, queen f7, winning the game in 16 moves. Yeah, hopefully this will give some inspiration to maybe some white players that want to spice up their white opening repertoire, be a bit more aggressive, less materialistic from early on. But yeah, if we go back to, I mean, even to this position, and we'll look from black's side. And hopefully this will be a useful lesson to my opponent, but to anyone who plays this as black. So after d4, taking and bishop b4 is the best continuation. But after knight c3, takes and castle, black should take with the bishop here. And I actually wasn't going to take back. I was going to play the move d5. This is the main line. If white takes back, then d5 is a really nice move to attack the bishop, support the knight, get ready to castle. And black is up a pawn here, so this is known to be a little bit preferable for black. But after d5, after bishop takes c3 and d5, then black should play the move bishop f6, save the bishop. And yeah, it's kind of a long theoretical line, but I'll just show how it goes. Rook e1, counterattacking the knight. Black should save this knight, and then after it takes, there's this move pawn d6, ensuring white doesn't get to play d6. And theory keeps going here. Bishop g5 is the main line. And after takes, black should not castle because that walks into some crazy knight sack followed by the queen and rook doubling up. So black should play h6. And then the main line here is queen e2 takes rook e1, and white has a triple battery on the e-file. Black has to lose back the piece. Black should play bishop e6, and after takes, pawn f6. And this is a line that, yeah, my my early chess coach taught me when I was pretty young, and I used to play this for both sides. Objectively, black is a bit for choice here because black's up a pawn, and even though white's pieces look menacing, all the pieces are basically blocked by the blockaded pawn on e6. So this is a pretty well-known position for anyone that plays this opening for either color. But yeah, hopefully an important opening lesson to take away for anyone that didn't know this previously. So let's move on. We're 2 games in. Do another 10-minute game. Playing Sulawesi from the country of UAE. Let's play e4. I'll play knight to f3. I was in the UAE a few times for various chess events. Went there for the World Championship match in 2021, I believe. Whenever Magnus played Nepo. Also played in Abu Dhabi about a year ago. So, okay, we'll play the same opening, Italian. Bishop c4. Ooh, f5. So this is called the Rousseau Gambit. And it's not an opening I've looked so much into. It's very similar to the Schliemann Gambit, which is when white has a bishop on b5. That's a variation within the Roy Lopez. Yeah, so I guess I should explain that the point is if I take on f5, then black can expand with combination of d5 and or e4, and yeah, black gets a lot of initiative. So I definitely don't want to take the pawn. As far as I know, the best move here is to play pawn d4 to counter-strike in the center. And now the idea is, okay, I can recapture on e5. So we're basically trading pawns. And because black has moved the f-pawn, then the king is a bit more exposed. Although it's hard to exploit. Like a move like queen h5 runs into g6. I don't think that really achieves anything. Meanwhile, yeah, my pawn's attacked. I was briefly looking at takes, and then queen h5 hitting h7, but after g6 that defends h7, so I don't think I want to trade off my developed bishop for the undeveloped knight. I mean, the obvious move is bishop to f4, defending the pawn and developing. This would run into queen b4, and let's say knight d2 defending the bishop, I lose a pawn. I'm going to go for this line. And we're sticking with the theme so far of today's games is I'm prioritizing piece development and early activity over material. It was not my intention to basically try and sacrifice every game early in the opening, but just kind of stumbling into such positions. But d5 is kind of surprising because the pawn's not defended. Maybe my opponent's trying to develop the bishop, but I don't think I mind taking the pawn. There's 2 ways to take the pawn. I could take with bishop or take en passant. I think I just want to take with bishop. I always have to ask if black has any like strong tactics in response, but I don't really see any way to exploit the bishop on d5. A move like e3 would attack my bishop on f4, but then I can just take with bishop or pawn. And now, I mean, black giving me some gifts. e4 is not defended. And even though my knight's pinned, the knight still helps defend the bishop because once the queen takes, then the knight's no longer pinned. So rather than being down a pawn, which I thought I was going to be after queen b2, I'm now up 2 pawns. So life is pretty good. A few moves come to mind here. I could castle, I could play c3. Rook b1 I don't want to play. There's no reason to defend b2 when queen takes b2 walks into rook b1. Be happy to open the file. So I'm considering queen h5. Queen h5 does run into bishop f7. So probably just castling, get the king out of the center. Black is maybe likely to castle queenside. And there is this pin. The knight was pinned to the king, but now it's pinned to the queen. So let's move the queen. And everything's defended here. Knight's defended twice, bishop's defended. b7 isn't defended, but... or b2 is not defended, I should say. But it's a pawn I would be happy to lose. And it's actually a pawn that I'll try and provoke black to take. I'm going to play c3. Now, especially in a case with opposite side castling, it's so useful to try and get initiative or get an attack on the side where the opponent's king is. My opponent's trying to pawn swarm maybe with h6 preparing g5. So I'd like to start generating threats. I mean, I could pawn swarm with b4, b5, or even a4, a5, a6 is an idea. Queen e3 comes to mind, hit a7. Can be met with king b8. Another move I kind of like is knight c4. Preparing knight d6. Let's go for this. And if bishop takes c4, then black's trading off one of the only developed pieces. The only developed minor piece. Black doesn't take the knight, so this gives me a chance to go in with check. Knight is very strong here, supported by the pawn. This is an outpost that's very deep in black's position. Now it's a question, should I keep my bishop supporting the pawn and also the knight, or do I move the bishop back, target a7? I'm going to move it back. I just like the image of the two bishops on the e-file. Like, they control so many squares, and especially the attacking potential now is very high. Black sacks exchange, which is probably a good practical option. The knight was very, very strong there. But of course, the downside for black is I'm up material, the d-file is opened, and I'm going to keep initiative. I have to move bishop to d4 here, which almost traps a rook. Yeah, maybe black didn't realize I was covering h7. If we just go back, bishop g7 was possible. Okay, opponent resigns. So kind of a abrupt finish there. I'll just show that bishop g7 would have perhaps been a better try because it's supported by the queen. But then I can take and then check, and life is very good. King c7, maybe queen d2 or rook a8. And white has a material advantage and the initiative as well. So yeah, going back in this game, I mean, I don't think I did anything so special. I think I did know how to respond to this opening, like this move d4. I didn't really know any theory beyond this position. And the resulting position, yeah, black was, I guess, a little bit slow to develop. Like, I managed to develop 3 minor pieces before black had any of these guys developed. And then d4, or d5, and then allowing me to capture 2 free pawns. Some nice Christmas presents. I'm still recording this on December 25th. So, okay, pretty smooth game. Let's keep it going. I am trying to live up to the promise of a longer episode. So let's, yeah, let's play the same openings. Another King's Pawn. So I played over 50 games so far in the speedrun, and it feels like the vast majority have been in a King's Pawn opening, like e4, e5. We have seen a few Spanish openings so far. I'll play a6 mainline. Spanish, also known as a Roy Lopez. Bishop a4 is the main move. And I'm going to play pawn d6. This is a Steinmetz defense. And it's another opening that my coach Tamara Golove taught me from very early on. And yeah, castling is very natural. I'll play knight f6. I think it was a few episodes ago I showed the Noah's Ark trap, which can stem from d4 and then b5, and then there's a line where if white does trade everything on d4, black can potentially win material, and we might see this play out. So I want to be sure that it's working though. If I play b5 here, there is pawn takes pawn. Although then I can take the bishop and then take back. I think that's okay for black. So let's go for b5. I mean, the main trap, what we call the Noah's Ark trap, is if bishop b3, then takes, 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 and then it'll be black to move and win material. I mean, first we'll see if it plays out. If it doesn't play out, I'll show everything after the game. White's taking time here, which is already a sign that opponent has identified the critical moment, because bishop b3 is not the only move. White can consider d5 or taking, both moves counterattacking one of the knights. I'm pretty sure bishop b3 is like a tactical mistake. Oh, opponent disconnected. Maybe some internet issues. I don't think there's any reason to rage quit so early when, things are just heating up. Is the auto resign incoming? Oh no. It kind of makes me sad. Like I wanted to play out the game, but okay, game abandoned. Gained 15 points there. So yeah, let me at least give an opening lesson. Going back. So when black plays d6 in this opening, the main trap is when white plays d4 immediately. And this is like the classic Noah's Ark trap. Black plays b5, bishop b3, takes, 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 takes. I'm pretty sure I showed this exact line in a previous speedrun episode, but the key move is c5 here. Attacking the queen, threatening c4. Black does have to be careful because after queen d5, these things are attacked. But then there's a move bishop e6, defending the pawn and the rook. After this, the rook's now defended. Black can play c4 and win material, obstructing the queen-bishop battery. So going back to what happened in the game, because white castled first in this position, it was a little bit different. And I'm just going to check to see. Yeah, the best move for white would have been to take on e5. And I was actually calculating pawn takes bishop, which is not the best move. We see the engine now really favoring white after takes, takes. I guess it makes sense that this pawn is super weak. Knight d5 also incoming. So if white took the pawn on e5, black should just take back, apparently. Allow the queen trade. Take with the knight. The bishop's still attacked. After bishop b3, then black has some choices. Bishop d6 is maybe the most solid. Defending the pawn. e4 is pressured. Bishop e7 coming. Castling is coming. It would have been a pretty balanced game from here. So anyway, it's kind of sad that we didn't get to see the game play out. But I'll take the rating and we will move on. Another game. Playing Naren Dr. Abadam. I'll play e4. Apologies if I butchered that name. But okay, opponent from the USA. And what are we going to see here? Opponent taking some time. Pawn e5. So every game this episode, King's Pawn opening, we see the Philidor. Now, there's a bunch of moves that are very playable for white. I think I'll just play Bishop c4, get ready to castle as quickly as possible. And yeah, Bishop g4. So what episode was it? It was episode 15. It was just the last episode that I had the really nice Lagall's checkmate trap, where if knight c6, okay, we're not going to see it here. If you want to see how that would play out, watch the previous episode. It was a nice opening trap that would involve a queen sacrifice. But from here, yeah, I'm not mating. Black defended against the simple mate threat. I think here it's just a matter of developing. Like, I'll play d3, get ready to get the bishop in play. Black could maybe go for knight c6, knight d4. And then I might have to go back to d1. Generally, when the player develops their bishop early and then trades for the knight on a square like f3, then like it's already a slight inaccuracy for black, because I'm able to activate the queen. And in previous games, we saw why it's not a good idea to bring out the queen early, but there's always exceptions to this rule. And this is a case where the queen, I think, is happy to be out and maybe used as a attacking weapon. Like, I could consider queen g3 here, which I think I'll go ahead and play. This move aligns with the king, prepares bishop h6. It also prepares a move like pawn f4, if I want to open the f-file, get the rook involved. We see pawn a5, which I'm not sure if this really has any purpose. Although maybe black wants to play c6 and then b5 and eventually trap the bishop. So I do have to be somewhat of alert of the danger on the queen side. But here I'll go ahead and play bishop h6. Very simple checkmate threat. If knight h5, I can move the queen to g4, keeping the pin and attacking the knight. Knight e8 is probably the safer move, like, even though it's really passive. It does prevent me from checkmating. And now I'd like to keep the attack going. A couple of moves come to mind. I mean, pawn f4 and knight d5, I think, are the logical ways forward. If I play pawn f4, I do have to be careful of allowing my bishop to get trapped. Like, then king h8. And if I play bishop g5, pawn f6, bishop h4, it's still probably okay. But it's actually not easy to like crack the setup here. I'm also looking at potential ways to like sacrifice the bishop. But yeah, I'm going to go for pawn f4. Don't want to be wasting any time. And I don't think the bishop is getting trapped. Like king h8, I can play bishop g5, and in the event of trading, then the f-file opens, which would be quite nice. So black develops a knight, reinforcing e5. And I'm actually not sure, like, if I want to play f5 and gain space, or if I want to take and open the file, or if I want to leave the tension. I'll take a moment here to consider the options. I think I want to leave the tension. Like, with either move, it feels a bit too committal. I think I'd rather just get the knight into play, just applying more pressure, creating ideas of knight takes bishop. And yeah, sometimes positions like this, you just want to keep building up the pressure until there's just enough straws to break the camel's back. My opponent being the camel in this case. So we see c6. I'm going to take the bishop. And this was one of the points, is to remove black's final bishop, and now I have the bishop pair. And assuming the queen takes, I do have bishop g5 now. The bishop served its purpose on h6. Now it's attacking the queen. f6 is not playable because the pawn is pinned. I guess I should be aware that black is threatening to play b5 and bishop b3, a4 to trap the bishop. So if I want to be safe, I could play a4, ensuring that bishop won't get trapped. I'm considering this, but I'm not seeing any way to like win anything concretely. Pawn or queen takes. So I think I will play a4. Not only preventing b5, but giving the bishop some room to move back. And I think this position calls for a very common type of thought process in the middle game, is to identify which piece is doing nothing in the position and make it do something. And that piece is a rook on a1. Would really like to enter the game. And because the f-file is very likely to open, I think the plan should be to double up the rooks. It's also a question, like, what is black doing? Actually, black has left the knight less defended here. I'm not gonna focus on doubling up the rooks immediately. I like the idea of just opening the f-file, because if pawn takes, then I take and I'm just crushing because g-pawn is pinned and there's no knight to recapture. If the queen takes, we won't see that. Maybe after the game I can analyze if the queen were to take. Yeah, here we see the power of the open f-file along with the queen aligned with the king. Maybe at some point black should have moved the king off the g-file. But not only did I win the knight, I'm now attacking the queen and threatening mate. Black does check my king, so let's move over. I think we're going to see g6. Now the plan is very simple. Queen h6 and queen g7. It is possible for black to defend with one of these moves. But life is very good here. Up a bishop. And I have the mating attack. And I'm looking for forced mate, but I mean, if queen here, knight here, I take, and then I'm just mating. Queen here, knight e8. I'm not seeing it. I mean, it's still, of course, very good for white, but I mean, is there anything better? I could save the bishop. I could play, oh, there's a lot of good looking moves. Play bishop e7. I could take on e5, preparing queen f6. I'm just going to save the bishop. I wasn't sure what to do there. I think like there are just a lot of winning moves, but I think that was a case where hopefully patience will pay off. Do have to move a little bit quicker here. You know, of course, a move like bishop e7 and winning more material than probably going after f7 is suitable. But I didn't go for queen here because knight e8 would then attack the bishop, and I didn't want to be in a spot where both bishops are hanging. So I'm just kind of resolving the threats on the queen side. Waiting for the right opportunity. There is actually a nice idea. I'm beginning to regret not having played it, but the idea would be rook f3. Of course, I have to watch out for my back rank because, yeah, I don't want to have an accident. But if I play rook f3, okay, well now I can play queen h6. Once the game ends, I'll share what probably what I should have gone for sooner. Queen g7 is now unstoppable. Black does have one spike check. Yeah, this is a case where Black is probably wishing they could move their knight back back to e8 to defend the square. Okay, Black resigns. So let me just quickly show what I realized. I guess in this position, what I could have gone for, I'm pretty sure this works, is rook f3. And I mean, this move would involve sacrificing the bishop, but then very soon sacrificing the queen. And the idea would be rook f3, I lose the bishop, and then queen h6. And whichever move white plays to cover g7, let's say knight e8, then I sack the queen, and this is a really nice mating pattern. Rook h3, king g8, rook h8, checkmate. So yeah, it goes to show there were probably a lot of different ideas to get the job done there. But yeah, overall, I think this is a nice game. I just followed opening principles. I think we saw a kind of a typical mistake of opponent bringing out their bishop and then just trading it without really really focusing on developing other pieces. So I mean, it's not like a losing mistake, but it led to a position where I got the quicker development, the quicker attack, and it led to very good things. So I think we're going to end on that one. I hope people could take away a lot of lessons from these games. If you have questions, leave them below, and I look forward to reading the comments. And if you like the content, subscribe, stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys soon.